Okay. Hey, everybody, I'm Cherie, the Money Lady. This is House Hacking 101. This is this month's webinar. Every month we host a webinar about a different topic. I am, first of all, proud. I got my own loan officer t shirt on. So I'm getting definitely into the groove of all the branding that we've been learning about. But I wanted to have this conversation, especially in the Metro DC area. It is sometimes harder for us, even if we qualify for a home, to feel like we can purchase a home without being house poor. So I, for example, I house hack with my mother. I said, I want to buy a house. My mother was like, I'm in. I paid for it. I bought, I did the down payment myself and the closing costs myself. But it is that part of the reason why I have some of the flexibility that I do with my life and my career is because I don't have to pay all the monthly bills by myself. My mom and I split them. So um, this is a great topic. Mike Weber is here. He is a realtor in the state of Virginia, and he is known as the House Hack King. So he deals with a lot of people who want to house hack. And if you ever follow him on any of his socials, he talks a lot about house hacking. But Virginia has more relaxed rules when it comes to renting than Maryland. So I wanted to bring on a Maryland agent who also specializes in house hacking and also can give us a little bit more of those tougher landlord laws. And Oluchi is here for that. So, first of all, welcome to the two of you. So glad to have both of you here.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I thought that I would break up today's conversation into three parts. The first part is, how do we buy the house? What are we looking for with the house itself? The second is, how do we finance it or fund it? And I'll talk about that just for a few minutes, just to give people an idea of some of the rules around that. And then the third part is, how do we rent? How do we find tenants? How do we manage them, etc. We may also add in just some other things that the two of you think about during the underwriting process, during the financing as well, that you're thinking of. How do people do inspections and things like that, just so they have a clear picture of how this process is going to work. So, and I do want to give one final thank you to, or not final, but one thank you to my assistant and right hand lady, Ariane. So if any of you have ever worked with
Hi.
me, you have Ariane before, and she is here today as well. So you can say hello to her, and I'm sure she'll respond. Um, so let's get started with, how do people even get into the mindset of thinking like, hey, I want a house hack? What are some of the things that they want to think about before they actually go out and tour properties? And I'll start with you, Mike. What are some of the things people should think about?
Yeah, usually for the clients that I work with, from the years of kind of putting it out there, this is what I do. A lot of the people that come to me already have it in mind. Like, I want a house hack, and they have a reason behind it. And everybody's reason is their own, it's personal, but it's usually financial purposes. Like, I don't want to be house poor, like you said. I want to build a
Mhm.
portfolio and I can scale quicker by doing it this way. But what I always look at most is two things, and they're really along the same line, but they're two sides of the same coin, which is, what do we need to do financially? Like, what's going to make sense for you financially? And then also, it is still your home. It's not just an investment property. Like, what do you need out of the house for your own living situation? Um, because oftentimes those two things can be at odds. Like, if you're like, I want to make the most money possible, it's like, okay, well, get a house with a bunch of bedrooms and get roommates and all that. And then, oh, but well, I don't want roommates though. And it's like, all right, well, we have to find where you fall on that comfort continuum, as I call it, where uh, it's the perfect balance between what's comfortable for you and making it work financially as well.
So in Virginia, one of the things that you've always said is you don't have a lot of multifamily like you do
Yeah.
in places in Maryland, for example, or Washington, D.C., where there are more multifamilies. So if someone lives in Northern Virginia, what are some of the house hacking housing options that they have available to them?
Yeah, to make it as similar to a traditional multifamily, like a duplex or triplex or something like that, what a lot of my clients do is they will, section off the basement from the upstairs. The basement will have a separate entrance, everything like, a wet bar. You can put a kitchenette down there and basically convert the basement into like a one bed apartment. Or if the
Mhm.
home's big enough, sometimes there's two beds down there. But and they can either live in the basement and rent out the upstairs, or they live upstairs and rent out the basement, whatever works for them. That's the most, that's the closest to the traditional, I'm buying a duplex, living in one side, renting out the other that we really have. You really have to kind of go out as far as like Winchester to really find many proper duplexes in Northern Virginia. Um, so there's that, but then there's grades that can get like more and more, less and less comfortable, more and more financially beneficial, right? Like if you do get a place that's a four bed, I have people that will live in the smallest bedroom, rent out three other bedrooms. Maybe the basement is also rentable as well. Um, and you have people that are getting pretty close to living for free sometimes with the roommate model if they're buying right, which is incredible for Northern Virginia. I know like in some other markets that's a lot more doable. That is a grand slam in Northern Virginia if you can get your housing costs covered.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that for the most part, the clients that we've worked with together and others that I've seen in Northern Virginia, they're like, Cherie, if I could do 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 after the other people have paid their part of the mortgage, I would be ecstatic. And to me, those are like 2017, 2018, prices with regards to like how much you would rent a 2 or 3 bedroom for. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, you were going to say
I
something else?
tell I tell all my clients like if you can own this home, because here, our price to rent ratios are, they're not that appealing compared to a lot of other places in
Mhm.
the country. This isn't the number one market that I would look into if I want to just buy and hold for
Mhm.
a 12-month lease, renting out the whole place. Like you have to get a little creative here. But if you can own a home and you're paying out of pocket what you would be paying to rent the home, you've won. Like you're paying renter prices to own in a great market that appreciates over time. Like that's
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, I will say that the DMV area is an appreciation play more than a cash flow play. So, Aluchi, so
Mhm.
same question for you. If somebody, before they jump in their car and start looking at houses, like what's some of the things that you encourage people to think about when they're thinking, do I want a house hack?
Yeah, I think number one is in terms of understanding the options, right? Especially in the DC and Maryland area. One of the options that Craig mentioned was, or what Mike mentioned was co-living, essentially, right? Some of them are ADU living, and some of them are going to be your traditional duplexes, triplexes. I think what people need to consider, number one, is boundaries. Understanding where their personal boundaries are, kind of framed a little bit differently, but are you comfortable living, in a co-living situation where you have you're renting multiple rooms, or are you more comfortable with a basement kind of arrangement where you'd have one or two of the basements, or are you comfortable with a duplex, triplex, quadplex, and with those, when you go up toward at past the third unit, you can start counting the other rentals income towards your home owning costs. So I would specifically think about boundaries. What are you comfortable living with? Then look at the convenient options. And to Mike's point, you also want to look at, since you are going to be living there, and conceivably, if you have to commute somewhere, what are your criteria? Do you need to be within a certain commuting distance from your office? Are you working from home? Can you live anywhere? Those kind of things you want to consider because they will dramatically impact your available options. So if you're looking to be within 20 miles of DC, that's going to give you a certain pool, or are you open to live as far as, Anne Arundel County and beyond? It really, so your living kind of criteria or your work criteria, your work life must-haves, as well as your boundaries will help you zero in on the places that are going to be most likely to meet those needs. And then from there, you can look at what the available options in those locations are. But obviously, too, you also want to look at price point as well. If you're going to be doing like a co-living situation, you're going to have to be able to carry the mortgage, right? Or qualify for the mortgage at least. But if you're looking at triplexes and beyond, then you can start counting on some of the other income that are going to help you with the qualification of the home.
Yeah. And I do want to say for residential, lower down payment options, you're looking at a 3 or 4 unit only. The minute you get to 5 unit and beyond, then you need 20% at least down. But if we're looking at anywhere from 0 to 5% down payment, then Aluchi is right. You can do 3 to 4, you can do 2 to 4 units for multifamily. Um, Aluchi, tell us a little bit about some of the multifamily that's available because I had asked Mike about this. Of course, in Northern Virginia, the multifamily options are not as plentiful. What are you
Mhm.
discovering for people who may want to buy multifamily in Maryland?
Well, there are some options, right? But I feel like they're a little bit more sporadic. There's some options in Silver Spring, some options in Laurel. You have to be very I have several clients who are on MLS drips for multifamily specifically in places like Prince George's County, in places like, Montgomery County, Howard County, those kind of areas. You do have options, but I think you have to be very willing to be able to jump on them as they come up. In fairness, I do also cover DC, and that the majority of your multifamilies are going to be in DC. But also too in DC, if you're interested in duplexes, there are some duplex options there that are very affordably priced. But once you get into the triplexes and quadplexes, they're going to be at a larger price point. But I think specifically in Maryland, number one, you want to just be open to the area and know that while they do exist, they're not plentiful, right? So when you do see something you're interested in, go ahead and look at it, right? You might see some in Hyattsville, some in Silver Spring, some in Laurel, some in Lanham, whatever they are. Just definitely take a peek and start looking at those places to see if you want to be considerate for them because they do move pretty quickly because there's not a ton of them. It's a little bit more renter friendly, or sorry, landlord friendly than compared to DC. So comparatively, people have the option they want to buy in Maryland. If the option was DC or Maryland, they would pick Maryland. So when they're available, definitely take a look at them. But they do exist, but just not good. You're not looking at like hundreds. You're probably looking at a handful any given time at your various price points.
Yeah. So that's a great point that you mentioned about inventory moving fast and how not only do you want to have like your criteria selected and know what you're looking for, so that way when it pops up on the market, you're ready to go. You do want to have your pre-approval letter ready as well. And you need to have that person in your corner where you're like, hey, went to see this property. I ASAP want to put an offer on this thing because I've seen where, the lender takes 2, 3 days to get that pre-approval letter back to you. And next thing you know, somebody else already has the contract or the offer signed and it gets away from you. So yeah, definitely. Um, so both of you, one of the other questions that I have for you is, let's say Winchester, some of these further out places. Let's say I work from home. I want something a little less expensive. Um, does a person who wants to do house hacking, or should I should say, a person who wants to do house hacking think about like, hey, what's the tenant pool out here, especially if they're trying to buy further out versus like, hey, if I live near a college campus or if I live near a hospital or if I live near the metro, I would have a greater selection of a tenant pool than if I move further out for the cheaper price points. It's like assuming that they can afford it, right? Let's just make that claim.
Yeah.
What do the two of you think about when it comes to something like that?
No, 100%. And that's an area that I have to say, like where I typically am operating in Northern Virginia, Fairfax, Alexandria, Arlington, Loudoun County, like any of those areas, it's man, unless you want to do like specifically like furnished midterm rentals, in which case I would like being near a hospital is a huge plus.
Mhm.
Being near a college campus can be a huge plus if you are looking to rent to, college students. Um, if you are like, hey, I'm not aiming for a specific tenant pool, then typically what you find in our area are just like young professionals. They have their first job out of college or maybe, their second job, but they're oftentimes in their 20s, maybe early 30s, single, no kids, that type of thing is the tenant pool. And Northern Virginia has become so unaffordable to people like that that there is just never a shortage of tenants. Like, because people will say, like, oh, what's better, you know, Reston or Springfield for this? And it's like, dude, you're going to have a line out the door no matter where you are in Fairfax County. Like, your biggest
Yeah.
challenge is going to be sifting through the applications because you're going to have so many of them if you're priced properly.
Mhm.
However, if you're going out to Winchester, if you are, going to look in like the panhandle of West Virginia or, just some of these other areas, it then does become more important. Like, who is my tenant pool? And you're going to have
Mhm.
more applications that you're going to have to pay a little bit more attention. Like, because
Mhm.
the tenants you get really can make or break your entire deal. Luckily in Virginia, like, if you do have to evict, if they're not paying the mortgage or if they're not paying their rent, if they're not abiding by the rules, the eviction process is not as painful as in other areas, but it's still not something you want to do. You want to collect your rent on time every month. You want all of those things. And those types of tenants are just very easy to find in Fairfax, Loudoun. Like, you're going to have tenants with great credit scores, great incomes. Why aren't you living in a one bed by yourself? Why do you want to rent a room? And like, you'll get answers like, well, I want to save up money for a down payment. I just want to live as lean as possible. I was living in my college dorm 2 years ago. Like, I had a roommate. This is no big deal to me. Those tenants are all great. Um, and there's plenty of them. The one thing that I always recommend people who are house hacking specifically, like, you're living in the home, fair housing does not apply to you. I recommend in-person interviews for your tenants. Don't just go off of credit score and income. Like, for me, I'm a landlord. Like, I would never interview my tenants because like I'm asking for them to complain about a fair housing violation. If I don't rent
Mhm.
to someone, they're going to say, "Oh, it's because of X, Y, or Z." You know what I mean? Like, I want to know as little about them as possible. I know their income, their work history, their credit score, if they have, felonies, stuff like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, things of that nature. But if you're living in the home, like, meet them, get a vibe. If you're a woman and you don't want to live with a man, you can say, men need not apply. I'm not comfortable. Like, you don't have to worry about any type of fair housing violation. And if you get a weird vibe, listen to it. I always tell people that, like, you have instincts for a reason. They're right oftentimes. And every bad story I've ever heard was like, I had a bad feeling and I did it anyway. Like, listen to that bad feeling. And like, you don't need to rent to your house. You don't need to rent your house to someone you're not comfortable with, you know?
Yeah. It takes a lot more money to get rid of them, not just the legal fees, but just everything than to choose right and take a beat. So,
And get
Oluchi,
get a lease signed too.
oh
I have people
please.
that rent to their friends and they're like, "Oh, it's my friend. I don't need to sign a lease." And like, I've seen those in bad. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, I don't care if they're your friend, get a lease signed.
Yeah,
So before Oluchi, before you
I
go, I just want to say one thing. As a house hacker, you are an investor, and an investor is a business person, and your house hacking is a business, just like anything else is. My daddy, may he rest in peace, always said, "Get your paperwork, get your paperwork, Cherie." So yes, please do, and please run it like a business. Alici,
have to second everything that he said in terms of like tenant selection. It's incredibly important, especially
mhm,
if you are a single person, single woman, and you're house
mhm,
hacking and you're doing a co-living model where you're sharing rooms and you're in close proximity with other people that you don't know. It's important to have that. It's also good for them to know that I find that people who are willing to go through a vetting process will appreciate that they other people will also go through the vetting process. So it may seem like, okay, well, maybe no one's going to sign up or no one's going to sign up, but truthfully, it's worth the vetting is worth it because it's harder to get rid of someone if you choose wrongly and you're going to be with this person for several months and they're going to be, sharing close quarters with you. I think in Maryland you have to be a little discerning on the area. I think like certain areas like Bowie, high income areas that typically do pretty well. And they're gonna have natural population drivers like schools, hospitals, places near military bases, places that are they're gonna have be naturally of value. Those areas, I know several people who house hack and they have single family homes. They do a co-living model and they get it up, but you're not going to get the line out the door. It may not happen as quickly in certain parts of Virginia sorry, parts of Maryland, to be honest about that. But I think picking the areas is going to be clutch. If you're going to be close to a metro, if you're going to be in places like New Carrollton, places like Hyattsville, even Silver Spring, parts of Silver Spring, very nice places that people want to be already. If you buy a home in those areas, you're not going to have an issue of getting tenants. But some other places are going to be a little bit more challenging, and people are less likely to want to live there, especially if there's a car requirement. Closer to DC, you're going to be fine. But if it requires a car and the areas are not as nice, those are going to be a little bit much more harder to fill.
Yeah, because I always think about the end in mind as well. So yeah, I do think it's important for us to think about what's comfortable for us, but also, and this was specifically for people who work virtually, like you could buy anywhere, then being strategic about where you're buying, not for price, but for the tenant pool if possible. So I'm glad that we talked about that.
And
Um,
can I add one more thing? Also think
Absolutely.
about your exit strategy. So once you move out of the house, are you able to rent it out? Will it be profitable for you to rent it out as in totality? Is there a midterm rental option that you can play? Is there a short-term
Mhm.
rental option? Is it what's going to be if you're going to just do a traditional long-term rental unfurnished? Will it still make sense? So understand that you're buying not just for now, but also what's the development like in the area? Or is anything coming to the area? Are you going to have drivers to the area so that when you move, you're able to still rent it out and still hold the property and know that it's going to make sense?
Yes, because in our grid network that Mike and I belong to, we believe you buy, you don't sell. As much as possible, you buy, you don't sell. So, um, do either of you have anything else with regards to the buying portion of this process before we move into the money?
This isn't so much in addition to, but I do want to just second exactly what she said, because when you have brought up the tenant pool and starting with the end in mind, like that is so important to understand this is what my exit's going to be. And stuff happens, like people have to pivot, things like that. If you have the ability to have multiple exits, like, hey, I can either rent this out as a short-term rental, I have a mid-term rental option, like what if short-term rentals get taken away, like all that stuff, just knowing what the options are after you move out, because that's equally as important. And then it's like you're playing a different game. Like you're a landlord and you don't live in the house at this point. Like
Mhm.
so understanding all of that is very important. Um, the people who I've worked with that have big plans, the only time they ever get stuck is when they buy something that looks good today, but maybe it's not the long-term hold that they would hoped it would be, and they can't qualify for the next house. They either have to sell it or they have to wait 2 or 3 more years to buy the next one longer than they wanted to. Um, so knowing like going into the buying process with like what is the exit going to look like on this home, like what's my timeline, and again, things change like always, but like have an outline, have an idea of what you think you're going to do with it when you move out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is while you're in the house, make sure to save. Because the whole point is to
Mhm.
purchase the house so you can get into your next property, right? And
Mhm.
once you kind of at a place of stabilization, remember the same diligence it took for you to get the house is going to be the diligence required for you to get the next house. So be
Yes.
intentional about, putting money aside and saving it, and just, the numbers are great, but it's not great if nothing's funded. So make sure that you
Yeah.
stay committed and you continue saving once you get the house.
So Fu asked a great question and I will respond to it. Her question is, are you buying under 1031 exchange? The answer is no, because a 1031 exchange is for investment properties. So house hacking is specifically for people who want to buy it as a primary home. Now, what will happen or tend to happen is if people are buying from an investment minded point of view, they will buy the property as a primary home from anywhere from 0 to 5% down. They'll live in it for 12 months, 24 months, 3, 5 years. And then they'll buy their next home and rent out that current one and do that same thing over and over again. So, um, what can also happen through is over time, especially in the DMV area with the appreciation that we have, is you will get to a point where you may be able to pull equity out of those homes, those houses, in order to purchase another strictly investment property. And at that point, after the person purchases that investment property and then decides they want to buy a new one, they can use the 1031 at that point. But it's specifically for investment property to investment property. Great question, though. So let's talk about the money a little bit. I'm not going to take too long talking about this. So the way that it works is that once you talk with Mike or Oluchi, they're going to say, love you, but you must have a pre-approval in order for me to show you homes. I work with a lot of realtors, and a lot of them say we won't show you a home without the pre-approval. So, what happens during the pre-approval process? I always tell people that any loan, any lender that's out there is looking for 5 things. Okay. They're looking at your income, they're looking at your debt, they're looking at your credit, they're looking at your assets, and they're looking at the property itself in order to decide if they're going to ultimately approve your loan. So, with income, it will depend on the kind of income that you have. The 0 to 5% down will depend on if you're a W-2 employee, how long you've been working there. If you're a recent college graduate, we can look at your college transcripts, and then you could have been at your job less than 2 years. But if you have just been working, you need to have been working at least in the same field for the last 2 years. And then we will do a credit pull. Minimum credit score is 580, but it's not just the credit score itself, it's also what's on your credit. If you have collections, if you have student loans, something else we have to calculate is child support. If you owe child support, we do have to include that in your debt to income ratio. We will look at the property itself. For the most part, if it's under 20 acres, even if you're buying in a rural area, you'll pretty much be fine, right? We will look at your assets. Assets is the amount of money that you have for down payment and closing costs. Even if you're using a down payment assistance program, you must have money in order to purchase a house. You need to have money for your earnest money deposit. Mike and Oluchi will tell you that. I always tell people at least have money for um, earnest money deposit. You need to have money for your home inspections. You need to have money for your appraisal. Where can you get the money from? You can get it from savings, or you can get it from a gift from your family and friends. All right. You can also get money from your retirement funds, and you will not be taxed on that. I still speak with people today who think if they pull money out of their retirement funds in order to purchase this home, you're going to be hit with a tax. No, you won't. So just to know that. You can buy a 1 or 2 unit property. And if you do that, then you need to have enough income and what's called the debt to income ratio. We can only use your income. We cannot use the rental income that you're expecting in order for you to qualify for the house. But if you buy a 3 or 4 unit, then we are able to use the expected rental income from the other units for you to purchase. We can use 75% of the rental income. And you may ask Cherie, well, how is the underwriter going to know where that, what the rental income is? They're going to know it from the appraisal. So the appraiser is going to look at the property. They're going to evaluate what the property is worth, and they're going to evaluate what the market rental income is for that property. Sorry, for that unit. And they'll let the underwriter know, and that's how we get that number. Oh, final thing. Mike has said this, and it is very, very true. The hardest part is going from owning 1 unit to owning that second unit. So, if you intend to do this as a strategy where you're like, hey, Cherie, sometime in the next foreseeable future, unforeseeable future, I know I'm going to want to go from owning this one property to owning a second property. Let me know that during the pre approval process so that way we can talk about it during your pre approval strategy call. And I can let you know, okay, for you to get house number 1, this is what we need. But for you to move to house number 2, you need to have these things as well. So that way, when you're going in thinking, whether it's Mike or Oluchi, all of us can be on the same page about here's the ideal first property that you have so that you can move more easily into the second property without it being a big, problem or concern or flat out, no, you can't do it. I have, for example, one client, and then I'll turn it over to Mike and Alucci. I have one client who came to me and said, Cherie, I want to do a BRRRR strategy for primary homes in Loudoun County. Actually, her realtor introduced her to me because her realtor said, Cherie, you're the only person I know that could guide her through how to do a BRRRR in Loudoun County for primary homes. Can you help her? And we actually came up with a strategy of what a BRRRR would look like based on the different loan options and how she can move from one house to the next house to the next house. And don't forget, the BRRRR includes refinance as well. Like you got to be able to refinance, pull your cash out in order to move to the next house. So the more complex you are, the more you would need, whether it's me or somebody else, you need a real strategist on the funding side to help you navigate all of that. So, again, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Mike and Alucci, did I miss anything with regards to the funding piece? Is there something you want me to elaborate on?
The only thing I would add, and then I actually do have a quick thing for you to elaborate on, that I think
Mhm.
is important. It does kind of go back to like buying the first one. You're 100% right. Like going from 1 to 2 is typically the most challenging. You don't have a ton of like rental income from being fully rented out since you've been living in it. So you don't have that to show on your income side of the debt to income. Um, the client that I'm working with Cherie on right now, like I believe she was pre-approved for like it was like mid to high eights or something. Like it was a pretty healthy
It
number.
was it was a pretty substantial number. I think it was a
Yeah,
million.
a million. The offer we're putting in is in the fives. Now, why
Mhm.
are we doing that? Because we want her to have room. We want some buffer room in what she qualifies for. So when she goes to buy the next one, the debt from the house she's buying right now isn't going to so heavily outweigh her income to where now she can only qualify for a $200,000 condo. And she's like,
Mhm.
well, I might as well just stay here. It's like that's so important if you're house hacking and if your goal is to scale and build a portfolio. I'm never a fan of like getting anywhere near what you could qualify for. You want to be under that unless it's a, which I don't do many of because I'm in Virginia, but like a proper multi-family, like threeplex, fourplex, like you could cover the whole thing, something like that. Like we're not including the additional rent. Um, and then in that case, like you're going to be bringing in enough money, and those units can be counted as income. Whereas, like
Mhm.
Sheree, and that's what I want you to elaborate on. If it's not a multifamily, you're not counting the potential room rentals, before you buy the house or something like that. And if you're doing a creative, let's say for just a year, you're doing short term by the room, even if you've been bringing in a substantial amount of money, if you don't have those tax returns and it's shown as income, they're not,
Yeah.
you're not going to tell Cherie, hey, my house is making 10 grand a month. And she says, oh, I'll take your word for it and write it down. Like that just isn't how it
Yeah.
works. So when you go from one to two, like you need to make sure you're claiming all of that income for you to qualify for the second one.
Yes, I'll expand on that. Unless you have 20% to put down. If you have 20% down to 20% to put down on house number two, then I have options for you and a 680 credit score or higher. Then I have options for you. Then I could take 12 months of your bank statement and bring it to some of my other lenders who will look at all of the short-term rental that you're getting in, your side business that you're getting money from, as well as your W 2, and they'll count all of that income for you. But if you come to me and say, no, Cherie, I just want to put another 5% down, I have to look at your taxes. Or what we can do is an appraisal of your current home, but we cannot count it as a co living space. We can only count it as one family. If one family were to rent this house, what would the income be for this house? And I can only count 75% of that income. So, true story. I was introduced to a gentleman. He wants to move. He lives in like Spotsylvania or someplace like that. He wants to move closer into the city. But when we did his numbers, his rental income was less than the market rental income was less than his mortgage right now because he bought 2 years ago. And then would have to take a 75% of that amount, and he just didn't have enough W 2 income in order for him to make that leap. So, those are the kinds of things that we do. Like, if this is your strategy, letting me know when we have our initial loan consultation. So that way I'm putting all the numbers together for you. And you know what's going to make sense for what you're buying today and what you want to buy in the future. It just so happened that that young lady that Mike and I are working with, she makes an extraordinary amount of money, and I'm like, as long as you continue making this amount of money, which she's been for years now, then, you'll have some leeway. Um, One of the questions here in terms of refinancing, what can be some of the challenges? What do we need to know? So, for the BRRRR strategy for the refinance, cash out refinances typically have an 80% loan to value, which just basically means with simple numbers that if your house is worth $100,000 and you want to pull cash out, the maximum the loan can be is $80,000. Well, if you bought the house for 85 and you're asking me for cash out, I can't help you. Well, let's say if you bought it like a year ago, right? Um, so that was like the really big thing, Delonta, that person with the BRRRR, I want to do a BRRRR for primary homes. I'm like, okay, well, the refinancing piece means that you need to get the property for such a low amount to purchase and renovate it for such a low amount, or you need to add so much value to the property that when you talk about pulling your money out of the property, that we're at 80% loan to value. So
Can,
that
can I
was the
add
big thing.
something to
Yes,
that?
please.
Um, if you're in an expensive market, because when she was saying Burring and Loudoun County, what immediately comes to my mind, because I run around a lot of people who want to do that. Um, if the idea is you're going to burr it to then rent it out and hold it, if you're doing a cash out refi and you are taking 20% out, let's say you kill it and you can take all of your money out in that 20%, which is fantastic. Your mortgage, unless you have a creative rental strategy, it's never going to cover the mortgage in an expensive market. Like the price to rent
Mhm.
ratios don't stand for it. In Loudoun County, you need to be at like 50% loan to value, something like that to break even most of the
Mhm.
time. So like keep that in mind as well because like it's a great strategy and it looks great on paper, but like you might to make the numbers work, you might have to leave money in the home and not
Mhm.
take out all your money just to make it work rent wise.
Yeah, so I didn't even get that far with the numbers because she only wanted to put down 5%, and the houses she was looking at, they weren't going to like I could tell you from right now that the strategy wasn't going to work. So I didn't even get to the 50% value of the property with regards to my numbers. But these are great points. So you do want to work with somebody who is thinking 3 to 5 steps ahead on your behalf. Aluchi, what are some of your thoughts with regards to the financing and funding for house hackers?
I think it's important to your point, having some liquid reserves and understanding like the strategy that you're going to have. If you're going to reserve, if you're going to keep some, if you're the whole point is to conserve the money that you do have in terms of purchasing the home. But once you're in the home, if you're thinking about like furnishing it, for instance, or for leaving it unfurnished, those are important to have. It's important to have some reserves because you're not going to have 100% occupancy 100% of the time.
Hmm.
There may be some ramp up time required. You might need some time to actually, source and vet folks. So you need to be comfortable with possibly having to carry the mortgage, if possible, if necessary.
Hmm.
Unless you're buying a house that's, someone who's going to move in the next day and you have your renters lined up, unless you have those contingencies already. But if you're buying a home and you're hoping to rent it out later, I think it's important to have to be comfortable with carrying the mortgage in case, the rent you're not able to rent it out as quickly as you want to.
Yeah, yeah, and you're absolutely right about like have savings, have reserves, have some money on the side because you may carry your mortgage for an additional 2 months in order to find that right tenant that is not going to, is credit worthy and has a great job and things like that. So, I am a big fan of as much as possible, we don't spend our last dime to get you to the closing table. Like, I really do work hard to make sure that my clients have money for moving, for, like you said, feeling like they can breathe after they purchase. So, um, let's talk about renting with regards to how we find great tenants. And it may be a little bit different in Maryland because of the tenant friendliness of Maryland, and DC is like a whole different animal. But Aluchi, I want to start with you.
Mhm.
What are some of the laws and things that people should think about if they want to do house hacking in those jurisdictions?
Well, in Maryland, it's almost by you got to make sure you're permitted. Most places to make it rentable, you need a permit, and the permits are based on like the counties or the not just the county, sorry, but even like the area. Like Temple Hills will have a permitting process. Oxon Hill will have a permitting process. So if you're looking to buy, and by the time you're actually like narrowing down the area that you're going to buy, and then you're going to and you're thinking and you have the idea of you're going to permit, you need you want to rent it out, make sure that you look at the permits and make sure that you understand what the permitting is. Typically, the permits are like a year and it's just a form that you fill out, but you want to make sure it's allowable first and it's zonable. Not every
Is there a
home.
cost to that? I'm sorry, is there a
Um,
cost to the permits?
it depends. Yeah, yeah. But it's not. It's a nominal fee. It's no more
Okay.
than like 100 or maybe $200. Less. I wouldn't even think. I would put it at a. It's these are municipal permits, so they're going to be like 80 to maybe 120. It's not a huge amount of money. The generally with the permitting process, they do come out and inspect the home, but you want to at least know what the permitting is and what's allowed, right?
Okay.
In terms of actually filling the home, you're going to use sites like, you can use like Furnish Finder, you can use Craigslist, there's a lot of like rent by the room sites, room spree, a lot, even Zillow, you can put up the place on Zillow. So I think the first thing is understanding if it's allowable, then posting, and also you can look around on those sites even before you post your own site just so you know how much things are being charged because you can kind of pressure test it to see how much can I get for this room or and you can even do that before you buy the home. But really
Mhm.
it'll help you in terms of understanding what the prices are going for and understanding what's allowable. But those would be the two things that I would do in terms of actually getting the house rented out. And then the third thing is really having like a understanding your own like vetting process. Mike talked about meeting the people in person. I 100% agree with that. Making sure you get credit score, your good IDs. I find that when people are willing to give you their IDs or put in an application, you can use a third party site like a Rent Spree to vet them and to get their credit scores. Those are going to be important because people who are willing to do that are more likely to be on the up and up versus just anyone that you meet. Those things are really important. And it's important to have to let them know that you have a level of professionalism when you're doing this. Because even though it is your home, you're managing like a business from the beginning.
Yeah. What about hiring a property manager in order to do the vetting for you versus you doing it yourself?
Well, I mean, I guess there's two schools of thought on that. Obviously, there's going to be costs involved with a property manager. Generally, they take about 10%, or at least they take the first month's rent. And that might kind of run counter to the whole point of house hacking, which is be to save money. But also, I
Hmm.
think as a new time investor and as a new landlord, it's important to get those skills yourself and learn at least from when you're first starting off as a house hacker, at least do it yourself, at least for the first couple runs and then when you're ready to kind of move on or shift your focus, then obviously then you can like hand it off to someone else. But first, it's important to learn it yourself. But just to answer your question, Maryland it varies based on the area, and with DC also, you have to make sure you have permitting for it to make sure it's legal.
Okay. And what about the HOAs? Do we have to go usually to the HOAs to ask, or do we look at that within their rules before we purchase? Like, talk to me about
Yeah,
that.
so generally, when you're buying a house in an HOA, you will get the HOA documents prior to
Mhm.
purchasing, right? You'll get them during the due diligence period. And if you know specifically that you want to rent out the room, that's something that you can actually inquire, you can ask to the HOA board, or you can read, it should be in the documents, but I would ask specifically if you have an HOA, then ask the HOA. So because if that's your goal, you want to make sure it's allowable. Right.
Mhm.
And that's going to be in your documents. It's going to be, or if you have a condo board, it'll be in the documents, whether it's allowable, and you have a contact within the HOA, which you can ask.
Okay. Final question with regards to Maryland and DC, or you can just answer for one jurisdiction. If for whatever reason I need to evict somebody, um, I won't ask how hard the process is. I may ask like, what's your first step? Like before somebody decides they even want to do house hacking, should they have an attorney that they at least have in their phone, or should they Google and research the laws? Like, what do you suggest for people
Well,
with regards to that?
Maryland has they have tenants' rights on their website. So you can Google tenants' rights in eviction court in Maryland and you can actually find the information about it. Um, I would number one, if you're going to evict someone, number one, I would as much as possible document everything early and often, right? If there are missing payments or if they're late on things, do it quickly, make sure your documentation is there and also be a don't the one thing that people mess up on during the eviction process is they want to kind of delay. They don't want to if people stop paying, send their eviction paperwork immediately. Go ahead and take off time and go to the courthouse and file their eviction paperwork because you know where they live. Once if they leave on their own, there might be a problem. You might have to spend money to find out where they are. right? So you want to be quick about it, and you also want to document quickly. And generally, what will happen is people will typically, they may miss a payment or be late on something. They'll be like, "Oh, I'll get you back later," and then they'll make it up at the end of the month, and then they'll do it. You need to be proactive and don't really allow for late payments, right? The moment someone is late, go ahead and start filing the eviction paperwork. Even if you don't go through the entire process, you've already set the precedent that, listen, I'm serious about this and we're consistent. But the process is really like you can file it as an individual, as a landlord, but you will have to have them served. And then they'll set a court date, and then you'll have to go in front of the judge and get a judgment against them. And there's two real processes. Number one, whether you're gonna have them repay your money, like repay you your lost rent, or get them out of the house, right?
Okay.
And so getting them out of the house may be a very lengthy and kind of uncomfortable situation. Generally, what will happen is people will probably leave on their own by the time it gets to that point, but then you're out of the money. So I would go ahead and file the paperwork and then allow for the process, because it does take time to get on the docket boards and to actually get a standing date for it to see it in front of a judge. But they also have to find the person. So if you're dealing with it, make sure that you document everything. You're very willing to take the time to go and file the paperwork in the courthouse and kind of follow the process. But the process is very public.
Okay. Mike, for Virginia, what are some of the ways that people can, you know, find roommates, and should you get a property manager? The questions that I asked Oluchi.
Yeah, on the property manager, I completely agree with Oluchi on that one. Like, I think those skills are key, and you know, they can be pricey. Like, 10% or 1 month's rent to help you find tenants. Um, when if we were in a different market, maybe it makes more sense. If they're hard to come by, maybe they have like a supply of people that want to rent out places like that you don't have access to. Like, most of my clients find their tenants on Facebook Marketplace. Like, you literally put up on Facebook Marketplace, like, you're going to have more applications than you know what to do with typically, like if you're priced properly. And then just like she said, like the in-person interviews, obviously checking the credit score. You had mentioned something about like what's on the credit report. This is, I guess, a personal decision, but like for me, that's important to me too, even more so than the score in some cases. Like, if someone just went through like a bad divorce or something, but like, there's just stuff related to that, or medical, for example, like things that are like kind of life happens type stuff, but you never missed a rent payment. Do you know what I mean? Like, I still trust you're going to pay the rent, even if your credit score is not great. Like, sometimes I can be leaning on that. Now, with that said, the so one of the areas that I own some homes is like not a great area. So like I have to sift through bad credit scores all the time. Like, that is what it
Mhm.
is. You know what I mean? In Northern Virginia, you're probably going to get people good credit scores, good income, all that stuff. The most important thing to me is like the in-person interview. I think you'll glean more from that than any other part of the process. So that's like hyper important. Um, and yeah, Facebook Marketplace. Now, it also depends on what you want to do. If you want to do midterm rentals, Airbnb is still the king for that. Furnished Finder is also great. And then short term, you have Airbnb, VRBO, stuff like that. In terms of permitting in Virginia, you don't need permits to house hack unless you're doing a short term rental. If you're renting out less than 30 days at a time, you do need uh, a short-term rental permit. Um, but other than that, you have the right to rent your home out. In Fairfax, they do have rules like no more than four unrelated people in a home. Um,
Mhm.
I have had clients that you know of the same alma mater, and they have five or six people in the house. They go to the same church. Like, the word related is very loose. I've seen
Mhm.
those hold up, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how crazy you can get with it, like, oh, we're of the same species, like, who knows. But so it's not
We're the
something I would
human
really,
race.
yeah, like, I wouldn't really worry about it, but that is a rule. I've never seen anyone get in trouble for it, but like, it may be worth noting. um and then for the eviction process, again, I agree 100%. Like, be on top of it. Don't wait around for it to solve itself. And like it's a very standardized process. Like, depending on why you're kicking them out, like, if they haven't paid, you give them a 14-day notice and they either have to pay or beat it, and they
Mhm.
can always pay you in full. Like if they pay you in full by the end of that 14 days, like you can't kick them out for being late all the time, but and then if they broke the lease, you have to give them like a 30-day notice. Like so there's standardized rules around it. Um and just follow those rules, but it's pretty straightforward, and it's really not too difficult to get somebody out if it as long as they are like legitimately breaking the lease. You can't kick someone out for being annoying to you, and like if you're doing a roommate situation, you might run into that. And if there's no, how does membership agreement versus lease work?
Yeah. If I could just respond to maybe the first question around the parking
Yeah,
spaces.
so let's read it for the recording. So Lucas asks, regarding parking, if I'm renting out 4 to 5 bedrooms but don't have enough parking spaces, can I pave over the front or backyard to create more parking spaces? Do counties usually prohibit that?
I would
Oluchi?
verify with the county. I would think that they would,
Mhm.
but also I would look at street parking. Not every and where the house is located. Sometimes if
Yeah.
the house is located near, if there's buses, if there's metros, not everybody has a car, and you'd be surprised sometimes where not the assumption is everyone is going to be driving, and that's not always the case. So, be upfront about the parking situation and let people know, hey, this is what the parking is. And generally, as long as you tell people, they can kind of self-select. But if there's parking in the neighborhood, if there's parking on the street, that could also you could also use that as to, compensate for the lack of parking spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah, parking is a huge thing for me when I'm looking at homes as well, because a lot of my clients, if they're going to do a townhouse situation, parking is very important. And like some places have it and others don't. And you can't just overlook that fact because especially in a townhouse, like obviously you can't pave over anything. I can say in Virginia, um, that's going to be an HOA thing. Like the county is not going to stop you from turning your, backyard into a parking lot or something. But if you're in an HOA, they're definitely going to say no to that. You know what I mean? Like if you go to Sterling Park and you drive around, like you'll see most homes have two driveways because a lot of times there's like multi-generation living. So they've paved over another side of their lot and now they have two driveways, but there's no HOA there. Um, so that's going to be more up to the HOA than the county on the Virginia side.
Yeah. Delanta's asking, how does membership agreement versus lease work in Maryland? Is it legal? If so, where can I get a template? Alucci, do you know what that is?
Yeah, I've heard of the membership agreement versus list. I would connect with a real estate attorney. I'm I'm an agent. I'm not qualified to speak on legal matters, so I would connect with that. There's obviously, requirements around leases, but membership agreements, I would speak to a real estate attorney.
Okay. If you need a real estate attorney, we may have access to a couple. So just email me and let me know, and we'll make sure to uh, get you to somebody who can either answer it or lead you to somebody else who can. So, final question that I have for you because it's 2 o'clock. What question should I have asked you that I did not? Alucci, we'll start with you. What question should I have asked you that I didn't?
I think the biggest question is like, maybe like what are the typical time frames people tend to house hack? Sometimes people think
Mhm.
it's a 1 year and a done situation, but you might end up being there 2 and 3 years. So kind of breaking out the common myths that people have around house hacking. So and then what is it? The experience of people who typically house hack. Yeah. So those are bring any common myths that they tend to be incorrect, I think would be a good question.
Okay. And Mike, what question should I have asked you that I didn't ask?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I feel like this is pretty thorough, and we got some help from the audience asking questions as
Mhm.
well. I do like the common myths. A lot of people are, and I mean, sure, you've probably heard me talk to people at Grid. Like, I can even be like, I push this big time. I think it's just like the best way to get started. So I love the common myths idea. Like anything that keeps people from doing it, because like in an expensive market, man, like being able to offset your mortgage expense, your mortgage is your biggest expense, most likely. So
Housing.
being able to offset a large portion of that, it just sets people up for life. And when I see people like kids in their 20s and stuff, like house hacking, they're on their second house, they're house hacking. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like you're just such on a path for success um,
Yeah.
by doing something that is not that crazy. Like you're not, working your butt off necessarily. You know what I mean? You might do that in your regular life, in your job, but like house hacking is not rocket science. It's not that difficult. Anybody can do it, and I 100%
Mhm.
believe that. And it's a tool that can literally set you up for an early retirement, a better life, all of that stuff. So like I just yeah, anything to dispel the common myths or like why someone might want to do this type of thing, because I think
Mhm.
it's powerful.
Yeah. So I will leave with one final thing. Uh, if you want to buy and you want a lower cash out of pocket, one of the best times to buy is between October and February. And the reason for that is because anybody, for example, who has to sell their home or has their home on the market during Thanksgiving and Christmas, they got to sell, right? Versus the summertime. So what I've been reaching out to people about is that we work on numbers. If you've got $10,000 or $15,000 and you're like, Cherie, this is my budget to purchase a home, we like create a process for you where you're able to purchase the house for less cash out of pocket. 10 to 15,000 again, depending on where you're buying and things like that. Um, but for example, for up to about 450, you can get in for about 10 to 15, 450,000. You're about able to get in for about 10 to maybe $12,000, which, if we're looking at cash on cash return, if you're house hacking as well, that could be a really great option for you. So, the best time to get pre-approved for something like that is between now and October. So that way you could work with Mike or Oluchi, or if you came from one of my other realtors, you could talk with them about putting offers in during that time. So, yeah, just want as many people as possible to let us know what you're looking for, what you're looking to do, and then we can get very creative on helping you achieve that goal. So Aluchi put her contact information in. Thank you so much, Aluchi. I'm sure Mike is going to put his contact information in. I'll stay for a couple of additional minutes just so y'all can grab that. But I want to thank both of you so much for being here today. And thanks to everybody who attended. Y'all came and y'all stayed too. So thank you so much. All right, everybody. I hope you have a very blessed week. And I hope to help you with the loan consultation if you need funding for this. Take care. Bye
Thanks,
bye.
Sheree.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheree. Thanks so much.